Hi, my name is Katie, and this is the first episode of what I hope will be a podcast. There's no name yet, um, but I intend to discuss things that have happened during the week in the news. So hopefully you will join me in this conversation and we will see what has been going on this week. Some of which you may have heard of, some of which you may not. But as of recording this, there is a story in the Associated Press that was published 43 minutes ago, and today is the 12th of May 2023. 1 dead, 3 wounded in shooting outside Indianapolis fast food restaurant. 4 people were shot, 1 fatally, outside an Indianapolis fast food restaurant where the 3 surviving victims sought help after the late-night shooting, police said today. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department said 4 males were shot shortly after 11 p.m. on Thursday, the 11th of May, in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant in the city's south side. Unfortunately, 1 male was pronounced dead at the scene, while officers found the 3 other victims inside the restaurant where they had ran to seek help, and they were hospitalized in stable condition, according to the police. Major Mike Leeper said police are investigating what may have led up to the shooting outside the restaurant. We do not believe that the restaurant is associated in any way with the shooting other than the individuals were in the parking lot, said Major Mike Leeper. The 3 individuals that sustained gunshot wounds that are still alive ran inside the business for help. Police said they recovered at least 2 firearms at the scene and were looking at surveillance footage from nearby security cameras to help in their investigation, according to WTHR-TV. So that's another shooting in America today. And in other news, we are staying in America, and this was reported on May the 9th. A woman who wrote a book on grief after losing her husband is charged with his murder. So this sounds like something from a book, actually. So this one is in Utah, because of course it is. And after this lady's husband died, she wrote a children's book on grief, but now she's being charged with his murder. Again, this is from the Associated Press. So Corey Richins, if I am pronouncing that correctly, was arrested on Monday, which was the 8th of May 2023, in Utah, and is accused in documents of poisoning her husband with a lethal dose of fentanyl. They live in Camas, a small mountain town near Park City. If you are American, you probably know what that town should sound like. Prosecutors allege that Richins called authorities in the middle of the night in March 2022 to report that her husband, Eric Richins, was cold to the touch. The mother of 3 told officers that she made her husband a mixed vodka drink to celebrate him selling a home, and then went to see to one of their children. And she later returned, and upon finding her husband unresponsive, she called 911. A medical examiner later found 5 times the lethal dosage of fentanyl in his system. In addition to the murder charge, Richins also faces charges involving the alleged possession of GHB, which is a narcolepsy drug. The charges, which are based on officers' interactions with Richins that night and the account of an unnamed acquaintance who claims to have sold her the fentanyl, came 2 months after she appeared on local television to promote her book, a picture book that she wrote to help children cope after the death of a loved one. For a segment entitled Good Things Utah, Richards called her husband's death unexpected and described how it sent her and her 3 boys reeling. For children, she said grieving was about making sure that their spirit is always alive in your home. She is quoted as saying, "It's, explaining to my kid just because he's not present here with us physically doesn't mean his presence isn't here with us." That's what she told the anchors on Good Things Utah, who commended her for being an amazing mother. Richard's attorney has declined to comment on the charges. And we have I think that's it from America Today that I was going to talk about. The lady who shot her, no, sorry, getting my cases mixed up. The lady who wrote a book on grief after her husband's death and is currently being accused of his murder. Apparently, the murder charge is tangled in an estate dispute. So let's see what's going on with that one. So previously I mentioned that there was an unnamed acquaintance who sold her the fentanyl. That person also told investigators that they sold the opioid hydrocodone once and fentanyl twice in February-March 2022 to Richins. The charging documents allege that Richins deleted text messages from the night of her husband's death before handing her phone over to investigators and may have tried to poison her husband on Valentine's Day, a month before his death. Shortly after their dinner, Eric became very ill. Eric told a friend that he thought his wife was trying to poison them, investigators wrote, referring to the Valentine's Day incident. Richard's attorney declined to comment on the charges. The Utah Department of Child Protective Services did not respond to questions about where the children are whilst their mother is held without bail. Months before her arrest, she told news outlets that she decided to write the children's book after her husband unexpectedly died, leaving her widowed and raising her 3 boys. She said she looked for materials for children on grieving loved ones and found few resources, so decided to make her own. In search warrants obtained by KSL.com and KPCW Radio, family members interviewed by investigators indicate that Eric was seeking to divorce Corey and had recently changed his will and life insurance policy. One of Richard's sisters told officers that Eric had long suspected his wife of attempting to poison him, including on a vacation to Greece several years ago. The warrants describe conflict between the couple over a $2 million home that Corey purchased with the aim to resell it quickly, despite the objections from her husband based on the price. Civil court filings that were submitted in different cases after Eric Richards' death outline how the suspicious circumstances surrounding his death have become entangled with questions over his assets and an estate held in a trust and managed by his sister. Richards has fought with family members of her deceased husband's family since the day after his death in March 2022, according to documents. Richards and her sister-in-law had a fight the day after Eric's death at the family home. She subsequently sued for more than $3.6 million and to remove Katie Richards Benson as a trustee, arguing that a prenuptial agreement she and her husband signed entitled her to his assets if he died before they divorced. It remains unclear how the estate dispute will be affected by the murder and drug possession charges against Richards. Utah law prohibits those convicted of homicide from profiting from their crime. So that one escalated quickly. Not only did she write a book on grief for children and then is accused of murdering her husband by poison, she is suspected of previously poisoning him. Also in UK news, This has been reported today, the 12th of May 2023. A offender has been found guilty of murdering a little girl after stabbing her 37 times. This is in The Independent. David Boyd had denied killing young girl Nikki Allen, who was battered and stabbed and then dumped in a building back in 1992. This has happened in Sunderland, which is northern England for those that aren't sure. And this person is on a register for the type of offender he is. I'm trying to keep this as PG as I can. But he is being convicted of murdering a 7-year-old girl after he managed to escape justice for 30 years. Nikki Allen, this young girl, her family never gave up their fight to see justice after the youngster was lured to her death in a derelict warehouse 300 yards from their home in Sunderland in 1992. After a trial at Newcastle Crown Court, David Boyd, who is now 55 and who was a neighbour of the family, was found guilty of murdering little Nikki, who was attacked with a brick and stabbed 37 times in the chest before he dumped her dead or dying in the basement of an old building. The police first prosecuted the wrong man, George Heron, who was cleared after a trial in 1993. Richard Wright Casey told the court that Boyd was known to Nikki's family. He lived in the same block of flats as her and was the boyfriend of her babysitter. Nikki was out with friends on the evening of October the 7th, 1992, and a woman told the police she saw a little girl wandering with a man now known to be Boyd. Mr. Wright said the little girl would occasionally drop behind and would then skip to catch up. This was Nikki Allen. She was with her killer and she was unwittingly skipping to her death. Boyd, who was 25 at the time of the killing, denied the murder but refused to go to the witness box to give evidence. Prosecutors said Nikki must have known her killer to willingly follow him. Grainy CCTV showed a male adult being trailed by a child. Locals told police they heard piercing screams on the night Nikki was killed, which is just horrific. And the tight-knit community helped officers who carried an overnight search when it was realised a schoolgirl was missing. The next morning, Nikki's shoes and coat were found outside the building, with her body found in the basement. Investigators believe Boyd must have hit Nikki outside the building and then lifted her inside and carried out his attack, during which he left traces of DNA on her clothes. 7 years later, Boyd assaulted a 9-year-old girl in a local park. He already had a conviction for breach of the peace in 1986 after asking an underage girl for a kiss. He told his probation officer he had fantasized about naked young girls. In 2017, DNA techniques allowed police to re-examine Nikki's case and extract samples from her clothing. Tests indicated a 1 in 28,000 match for Boyd, or a male relative of his was found on the clothes in multiple areas which the jurors heard as part of evidence. Police were then able to go back and request DNA tests from the man they considered a mere witness 31 years ago. Boyd was arrested on suspicion of murder in 2018 and charged last year, 2022, after a painstaking investigation involving the DNA testing of 839 men linked to the area at the time. So finally, this little girl and her family have got justice. Whilst it will never bring her back, at least this monster has been taken off the streets. And in other news, we are going to Iran. So, more women in Iran are choosing not to wear the hijab, but the government are clapping back. Billboards across Iran's capital proclaim that women should wear their mandatory headscarves to honour their mothers. But for maybe the first time since the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran, more women are choosing not to do so. Such open defiance comes after months of protests over the September death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in the custody of the country's morality police for wearing her hijab too loosely. Whilst the demonstrations appear to have called for the choice by some women not to cover their hair in public poses a new challenge to the country's theocracy. The women's pushback also lays bare schisms in Iran that have been veiled for decades. Authorities have made legal threats and closed down some businesses serving women not wearing the hijab. Police and volunteers issue verbal warnings in subways, airports, and other public places. Text messages have targeted drivers who had women without head coverings in their vehicles. The protests erupted at a difficult time for the Islamic Republic, currently struggling with economic woes brought on by its standoff with the West over its rapidly advancing nuclear program. Some women said that they've had enough, no matter what the consequences. They'll say they are fighting for more freedom and a better future for their daughters. Iran and the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan are the only countries where the hijab remains mandatory for women. Before protests erupted in September, it was rare to see women without headscarves, though some occasionally let their hijab fall to their shoulders. Today, it's routine in some areas of Tehran to see women without headscarves. For observant Muslim women, the head covering is a sign of piety before God and modesty in front of men outside their families. In Iran, the hijab and the all-encompassing black chador worn by some has long been a political symbol as well. In 1936, the hijab was banned as part of efforts to mirror the West. The ban ended 5 years later, but there are still many women who choose not to wear the hijab. In 1979, following the Islamic Revolution, some women embraced the chador, which I may be mispronouncing. It's a cloak that covers the body from head to toe except for the face. In 1983, it became the law for women to wear the hijab, and it was enforced with penalties including fines and 2 months in prison. In early April this year, Iran's supreme leader declared that removing the hijab is not Islamically or politically permissible. He said that women refusing to wear the hijab are being manipulated. They are unaware of who is behind this policy of removing and fighting hijab. The enemy's spies and the enemy's spy agencies are pursuing this matter. If they know about this, they will definitely not take part in this. Hardline media began publishing details of immoral situations in shopping malls showing women without the hijab. Police have shut down over 2,000 businesses across the country over admitting women who are not wearing the hijab. The government offices no longer provide services to women not covering their hair. Police have said that surveillance cameras with artificial intelligence will find women not wearing their head coverings. It's unclear if that is currently operational. One person has been quoted as saying that she doesn't want her daughter to be under the same ideological pressures that she and her generation have lived through. She wants a better future for her daughter. When people ask why we need feminism in 2023, it's things like this. That women are being forced to wear certain things, and if they do not wear them, they face criminal prosecution, and God knows what happens in those prisons. On a lighter note, this is quite cute. We're off to Portugal for this one, and we're celebrating someone's birthday, Bobby. if that is how it's pronounced, is celebrating his birthday. He turns 31, but Bobby is quite special. He is the world's oldest dog. So over in Portugal, they're having a traditional Portuguese birthday party for him. He is the world's oldest dog, and it's been recognised by Guinness World Records, and he's just turned 31 years old. He has a party that has 100 guests, according to the Mirror. He's got big party plans. He was declared the world's oldest dog ever 2 months ago. He was recognised by Guinness World Records as the world's oldest dog on the 1st of February, where he broke a nearly century-old record previously held by an Australian cattle dog who died at the age of 29 years, 5 months back in 1939. Bobby is a Portuguese livestock guard dog whose normal life expectancy is between 12 and 14. He was born in 1992. He's never been put up on a lead, and he's allowed to roam the woods that are around the village. Walking is a bit difficult now, so he spends most of his time with hanging out with the cats or napping, which sounds pretty much like me. So I thought I would end on that story after what we've just reported on. It's a miserable world out there, but Bobby the dog has celebrated his 31st birthday. He's the oldest dog in the world ever, which is so cute. I will list all the stories in the links below. I would like to hear your comments. Please keep it a friendly discussion on the various topics. In the next one, I may discuss how a mass shooting in the UK affected our gun laws. If that is something you would like to learn about, please let me know. This was my first podcast. I have stuttered quite a bit, but fingers crossed it's okay. I hope you've enjoyed it. I thought I would do a weekly podcast of things that have been in the news. I also do a blog online, links below, where I write about all sorts of weird and wonderful things. I write about books, feminism, history, mental health, current affairs, general nonsense, chronic pain, anxiety, and I also have a blog about houseplants where I give advice that I have learned from my own collection, as well as a bit of history regarding the plant kingdom and just bits I find interesting. So if that's something you would like to read, I will leave that in the description below. But if you're more of a listener than a reader, I would appreciate you subscribing to this podcast, sharing it all over the socials. I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about the epidemic of gun violence in the USA. It's a very foreign subject to myself, being from the UK. We have strict gun laws, and we don't have many instances of gun violence. We have some, don't get me wrong, but we don't have many. So I'd be interested for you to join in the conversation in regards to that. And I think that's it. How do people normally sign off these things? Okay, bye.